record, share.
Nice. All righty. Cool. Welcome everybody. Happy Monday and happy holiday season as well. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're safe wherever you may be. We are back here for another Monday Night Mock interview with Corey Hiramoto, this time with Dave Stark, a product marketing manager here in Silicon Valley. Corey will ask the question, Dave will answer, and you as the audience can ask anything that you want along the way or cheer Dave on. I'm going to go ahead and let Corey give his intro here in a quick moment. And this will also be available on Albert's List afterwards. All right, Corey, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, so it's going to be up on Albert's List. I think it's going to go up on your YouTube channel as well, right, Albert?
Yes, if Dave says yes.
That is fine.
Awesome. Yeah, so
Okay,
everyone should definitely check out the Albert's List YouTube channel. Subscribe if you are not already. He posts all of his event replays if you can't make any of those. And then I've also got a YouTube channel as well where I post weekly videos on like interview tips, resume writing, career transition, stuff like that. So definitely check out both of those. Now today, I think all of you are in for a treat, especially those of you who took time away on a Monday night to come and learn how to get better at interviewing. Dave so bravely volunteered himself, but what's even cooler than that is he's actually in progress interviewing with a few companies. One of them is Mission. And this is super interesting and very valuable for everyone watching because Dave has done like 3 or 4 rounds of interviews, right, Dave?
Yeah, at least 3.
Okay.
Three, and
That's
then
awesome.
there should be a 4th one to come.
Yeah, so he's got a final round coming up, and so we're going to help him get paired up for that. But also, the benefit for all of you watching and listening is that Dave has actually passed along some of the real interview questions that he has been asked in his product marketing manager interviews. And so we're going to run through some of those. I've also got some new ones that I've drafted up for Dave to practice as well. So you can really learn like what are real interview questions that people are getting asked when they're applying for PMM roles, and kind of how you should be thinking about answering them. So thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate it. And before we get into the actual mock interviews, why don't you give everyone a quick little introduction on yourself and maybe talk about some ways of how people can help you and say thank you.
Sure, happy to. So I am in Silicon Valley, as Albert mentioned, and I currently work as a PMM. So I've been in product marketing for 2 years now. And then prior to that, I worked in global sales operations for a number of years. So at my same company, I was there in global sales ops for 4.5 years, working on tools and processes that reps would use. And then prior to that, I was at HP for a number of years where I was a customer-facing operations manager. So I manage the relationship with large corporate customers and ensure that they had a good experience as a customer. So that's what I come from is I'm looking for product marketing roles, but I've also only been in product marketing for really 2 years now. So I have a lot of experience before that I brought into the role that I'm in now, and that I'll then take to my next role. But it's a bit different than other product marketers who maybe have been in product marketing since they started their career. And so I had a longer period of time in it.
And actually, if I mean, not to detract too much from the purpose of tonight's session, but I love a good career transition story, and product marketing is super popular in the current environment right now, Dave. So just for like a quick summary for folks who are interested in potentially doing a career switch into product marketing, how did you do it?
Sure. The background that I came from, so when I was in global sales ops, I was working on a prescribed sales methodology that we rolled out to reps. As part of that, I would work closely with sales teams, go-to-market teams, and product marketing teams. And what I really wanted to do with my career was 2 things. One was get back closer to the customer, as I had been doing that at HP previously. But then 2 is I wanted to, and this was the bigger thing even, I wanted to work much more on content. I liked what the product marketing people that I worked with did. And so I wanted to do more writing and more content creation. And the way that I made that transition was really just, I was in a big, I was, and I'm in a very big company. And so I think what had happened was I don't think it was from just seeing a job posting. I think somebody had sent me to an internal recruiter and I told them that I was interested in product marketing. And then they reached out to me and said, there's this opportunity. And then from there, I talked to the hiring managers and then made that transition into product marketing. And I actually did it's in terms of my 2 years in product marketing, really only one of those has been as a PMM. So the first year I was in a role where I was running a win-loss effort that was in trying to determine why we were winning and losing deals. So it was sort of a transition, like a slow roll from global sales ops to running this win-loss effort, and then straight into more traditional product marketing that I do now.
That's an awesome story. And I think that's definitely something a lot of people could leverage as well. So basically, if you are working in an auxiliary role or function where you interact with product marketing managers, sales, product managers in general, then you can kind of build your skill set pseudo in a way at network, because it seems like someone identified you as someone who would be great for this role, and then you were able to transfer internally. So I think that's definitely one route that a lot of people should definitely consider. And thank you for being so brave and putting yourself out there in front of everyone. So I guess, how could the community say thank you? Are there certain companies or jobs or industries you're looking to find employment at, besides Mission?
I don't know that there necessarily is. I've been interviewing for a couple of different types of roles, but the one that I've been spending the most time interviewing for, and I have the most interested in is senior product marketing manager roles, from the perspective of both, I like what I do in terms of product marketing and the career experience that I have. Granted, I've only got a couple of years in product marketing, but I have all of this experience beforehand. It kind of lends itself more to a senior product marketing manager role. And so that's in terms of the type of role and the company and the profile. Honestly, I don't think I have one. I've been talking to a lot of tech companies just because I am, in the Bay Area, but then also even companies like Mission, which is based out of LA, but is really largely entirely virtual. Yeah, I wouldn't say that I have an industry or a company. Like, I've been talking to a lot of places that are very data focused, which makes sense from the perspective of the work that I do now. I work on things like a customer data platform. So very data focused. And then my global sales ops background is very data focused and numbers focused as well. So I guess that's probably the answer to your question, is companies that are very data focused, and that it is a very core part of either what they do, and then also potentially how they approach what they do, because those can be two distinct things, both what a company does and then how they approach what they do, in terms of just being very focused on numbers and trying to use numbers to drive decisions. That's kind of my background of what I've always done and worked with.
Makes sense. All right. So if anyone watching this wants to say thank you, or if someone watching this wants to hire Dave and they work at a data-driven technology company, or just a data-driven company in general, and they need a senior product marketing manager, I've got Dave's contact info all up here, and you can always reach out to me or Albert as well if you would like to get in touch with Dave. So tonight we are going to be practicing for Dave's final round interviews with Mission for their product marketing manager role. Now, one thing that is pretty unique about this job description I noticed is that pricing experience was mentioned quite a few times, which I haven't seen too often in many PMM job postings. And so that's definitely something we're going to be practicing tonight as well. And even one of the questions that Dave was already asked during his interviews was pricing related, which we're going to practice in a bit. So just to give all of you a quick little teaser. But yeah, so that's the job description. And Dave, are you ready to get started?
I am ready to start.
All right, so we're going to do a mixture of questions Dave has been asked before, and then some new ones that I've crafted up so that Dave can get ready for his final rounds. So let's start with one you've already done. So Dave, how can innovation be a regular feature of the teams that you interact and work with here at Mission?
Sure. The thing that I would say is that it comes down to an environment where the people that you're working with, whether they're the people you're working with on a day-to-day basis, that you're always interacting with them, or whether it's the people that are in sort of the ancillary groups that will come in occasionally and will have their input into something. It's creating an environment where people feel encouraged and welcome to make their voice heard, to put their ideas out there, to make sure that if somebody's got a thought of, okay, there's a better way to do this, that idea is said and that idea is evaluated, and that it really is an open environment and an open dialogue. I think that's the biggest thing to encourage innovation, is you need to have people feel, okay, I've got a thought and it's great for me to put it out there. Maybe it'll get used, maybe it won't, but either way, it'll get listened to and then evaluated.
And so how can you foster that type of innovative environment and psychological safety with the teams that you're going to be working with?
It's a matter of respect. It's a matter of respect and a matter of appreciation. There's a lot of different, I think back to the roles that I've had, whether it was in my current role or whether it was in my past roles, there's all sorts of different people that you work with who have all sorts of different things that they want to accomplish, whether it be go-to-market people who have certain KPIs or product marketing people who have other KPIs, or sales leaders who have other KPIs. Everybody has slightly different things that they want to accomplish. All of them should get to the overall goal of building value for the company and then increasing value for customers. But people have these different things that they want to get out along the way. And so you have to have these conversations with people, and you have to be open to, okay, what are the ideas you want to accomplish? What are the ideas that you've got? And then also, what are your KPIs? And like, can they be achieved? And can I help you be successful? Like, as we're getting to this overall goal of the company being successful. And that really does come from listening, from taking the time to hear, okay, what are the ideas? Taking the time to say, does anybody have anything they want to add? Taking the time to say, okay, are we getting everything on the table that we should discuss? Like, it's a very soft skill thing, but it's a very important thing. You really do have to build that environment of openness and collaborativeness and of listening, and then also keeping in mind that all these different groups have all these things that they want to get at, and you need to be cognizant of, okay, how can I help people succeed, and then ultimately help everything work, value for the company and then value for customers.
Great. Okay. So how much of that was the actual answer you gave in your interview?
Probably all. Probably all.
Nice. Okay. And did they ask the same follow-up question that I did?
Potentially, because if I remember correctly, like your follow-up question, it was a digging in.
Mhm.
And they may well have.
Okay, great. So this question is tough. Now it is a hypothetical question because it wasn't asking Dave to talk about a time when he did create innovation with his team, although he could have spun it that way as part of his answer if he wanted to, but they worded it as a hypothetical. And so that's what makes this question so difficult, is there's many different ways to essentially correctly answer this question. And so how Dave initially answered it was basically talking about creating psychological safety for the teams that he works with. And then so my natural follow-up question is, okay, great, how do you foster that type of environment to create such psychological safety, which therefore allows for innovation to happen? And then Dave explained how he does that by making sure that everyone's goals are achieved, KPIs, and then making sure that people's voices get heard. So overall, I think it's a solid baseline answer. I think it answers the question, but what I would love to see is for you to sprinkle in a little bit of your experience and knowledge as to what you've learned over your years of experience working in both sales operations and as a PMM, as to what specific things help innovate, or sorry, generate ideas for the folks that you're working with, whether that's for certain products, whether that may be from a pricing perspective, whether that may be from just a pure marketing perspective, right? Innovation is actually a broad term, and I'm sure they worded that in their question on purpose, just to see how you would kind of tackle it, right? If I
Right.
was going to answer this question, I first want to define what innovation means for me as a PMM at Mission, right? Maybe I'd categorize innovation into three different categories, right? One is around like the actual product itself, whether that's a new product or certain product features, probably by gathering customer feedback or looking at the market, maybe looking at competitors. The second way that I would define innovation is around like from your actual marketing expertise, right? Like how can you be innovative in terms of putting campaigns together or launching products, doing product launches, events, etc. And then maybe tackling innovation from like a third perspective, which could be something around, I don't know, um, like general creativity or like, I don't know, psychological safety or some like behavioral trait maybe. And then you could walk them through how you would actually and allow that type of innovation to happen. And then how you would do that would be, it would also reflect basically on the experience you have over your last 21 years working or so as to how you've seen certain strategies, products, pricing, etc., evolve due to
Mhm.
innovation, right? And then you can basically point to how you were at the center of all of these innovative things happening for X, Y, and Z company or for X, Y, and Z product. And then that would inherently just solidify your case as like this standout PMM candidate that they basically have to hire. Does that kind of
Right.
make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like going one level deeper. So right now your answer talks about the hypothetical situation and how you would answer it hypothetically. But now what I would love to hear is, okay, this is how I'm going to create innovation, but like, what does that really mean? How have I specifically done that in the past? Or like, what things have I seen that allows my company to be successful or allows my product or my teams to be successful? And then that's kind of like how you would present the whole package to them, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yep. For sure.
All right. So let's do a new question. Oh, and by the way, Carolyn, I did see your questions, or Carolyn and Carla. Carla, I'll answer your question at the end, just so it doesn't detract from the mock interview session piece. And then Carolyn, I'll talk about Dave's resume at the end. All right. So new question. Dave, in the cloud space, what are successful elements of a product launch plan that either you have seen or you have personally been responsible for?
Sure. Let me make a note here, make sure I get it right. So as I think about this, I think about it as a matter of breaking down the elements. So breaking down the components and the elements in terms of the specific work that I've done within product marketing, working on our data products. I haven't been involved in anything that has been an entirely new product launch, but I have absolutely been involved in products that we changed dramatically and then brought to market those changed products. And so it's a matter of getting all the elements right, of getting the pieces of, okay, we had a product that did one thing, and that was a very analytics focused product, but then that product was fundamentally changed in terms of what it did. And so going from being something that was about analytics to being something that was really much more about real-time personalization, really much more about, okay, letting marketers craft messages for specific audiences and deliver it to people in the moment. And so what we had to do is to try to make sure that the elements were broken down into pieces and everything was lined up properly. So when I say lined up properly, what I mean is that we had the timing right of, okay, as the product was changing, that we had changes that were occurring on the website, so that there was messaging that was consistent with what we were putting to market and then what was out there for people to see online. And then also messaging that went out to sales. So we had to go through and make sure that all of our collateral was up to date. So things like customer presentations that reps would use, that those were all current, but then also other assets they would use like white papers or thought leadership papers, that all of these different things reflected what it is that we were actually selling. And then also coordinating with campaigns teams that would launch campaigns to ensure that they had the right messaging. And then the other thing that would happen is as you line all these things up, so you break it down into the component pieces, but then it's just repetition. So like we're a huge company like that I come from in terms of the product marketing work that I do. And we wanted to make sure that we had repetition with the sales teams of here's the messaging, here's the assets, here's the best way to present this, here's what it used to be, here's what it is now in terms of what you should say. And you just have to continually do this from an enablement perspective. So part of it is the content. You have to get the content right, but enablement is going to be sessions with 5 reps, sessions with 10 reps, sessions with 90 reps, where you're just going over and you're continually reinforcing the message of what it is that they need to communicate. And so that's, I think, the important thing is the breaking down of the component pieces and then just lining things up and then just repetition. So those are really the things that I think matter the most.
Cool. So I like the parts of the answer that you chose to highlight. I think it was, you said timing, it was organization, and then what was the third thing? Or the third
Repetition.
element? Repetition. Okay. I like all of those. So I think what would enhance the answer, if I could think of something, I think the organization of the answer would have been a little bit cleaner. It was hard for me to track in the beginning, like what specific elements you were going to talk about.
Right.
Because I think as you were getting ideas, right, you would talk about them, and then when you thought of something else, then you would talk about that too. But I kind of didn't know where certain ideas were starting and stopping, or elements starting and stopping, and then the next one. So I think organization at the beginning would be a little helpful. And then there was one other thing that I was thinking of. Oh, examples, like very, very short examples of how you've seen like the timing piece. If you don't get it right, what may happen? Or when you did get it right, what did happen? And it's not like a full star, like 3-minute long example, but just, you know, this reminds me of a time when we had to do X, Y, and Z, and we forgot to do X, Y, and Z, and then turns out because we weren't consistent, we didn't have the, you know, the right whatever, we ended up doing X, Y, and Z. But I've learned from that now, and that's why I feel like this is a really critical element, right? And you don't have to do that for all 3, but just like maybe 1 or maybe 2 examples, at least 1 example for sure, would really drive that point home for the interviewer, because then you can relate it from your experience, as opposed to just like conceptualizing ideas, right? Because they may disagree with you, for example, right? They may think, well, I don't think timing is that important. I mean, I've been doing product marketing for years. I mean, Dave says it's like one of the important things is timing. Like, I don't think that's true. But if you give him an example, or her an example of a time when, you know, you didn't think it was important, but turns out it was because X, Y, and Z happened, then they may go, oh, okay, well, I never thought about that. Good thing I'm hiring Dave, because he has a different perspective, right? So that's the other advantage of sprinkling in an example every once in a while too, is because just in case they actually disagree with you and they feel like your answer is wrong, with a concrete example, it's kind of hard for them to discount you, right?
Right. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that feedback?
No, it makes sense. I mean, one of the issues that no, it makes sense. I mean, one of the things that I run into is with a question like that, which is for the types of jobs I'm interviewing for, it's a very valid question and it absolutely makes sense to be asked, but I don't really have a direct answer to the question because I really don't have that direct experience of bringing a new product to market. And so like I can talk about, and like I did in my answer, talk about, okay, here are things with a product that changed and we really reintroduced to the market. Or the other route that I could go is, and this is also an avenue maybe that I would take, but is I could also talk about specific examples from global sales operations of as we were introducing, like in that case, as we were introducing a methodology, what we had to do in order to have it gain adoption and make sure that it was being used properly. I just sometimes I have the thought in my head of, okay, do I answer a given question from a product marketing lens where I know I may be kind of light on what I have for the answer, or do I just go, okay, fine, I'm going to go ahead and just answer this from a global sales operations perspective, and like I've got a lot more that I can say.
Yeah.
It's
So
tough.
there's
tough. I often
two
do a blend.
there's two questions baked in there. So the first question is around Corey, which example should I share because I haven't done a specific like brand new product launch? And honestly, your answer was perfect. Because I mean, in my mind, whether it's a product rebrand or like new features for a product, etc., like you work at a much larger company than Mission, right? So even just rebranding a product or like launching a new feature could almost be the equivalent work and scope and scale of launching a brand new product at a smaller company, right? And so I think the example or route you chose to go was perfect, absolutely perfect. The
Okay.
second question is basically, Corey, what examples should I be sharing, knowing that I only have 2 years, maybe 3 years of product marketing experience, and the rest is in global sales ops? Well, I think the relevance is always going to be important. So the closer you can get to the actual job itself is always better. However, you can't use the same projects over and over again, right? And given that you've been doing it for two years, give or take, once you kind of share an example or a project, and then that's kind of it, right? So
Right.
in the next time you get asked another question, then maybe it will have to come from your time in sales ops. But I would say always start with the most relevant stuff first. And then once you've used it all up and you know that you can't go back, then you can definitely pull in some of the sales ops work.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, and also it maybe you were basically acting as a PMM, but your formal job title may have been under Global Sales Operations Program Manager. And then in that case, right, like they don't even need to know that. If it still sounds like PMM work, then that's PMM work.
Sure.
Yeah. Because I can see how even as a program manager, some of the stuff you could do would heavily overlap with being a PMM, right? But in
Right.
your head, you're like, oh no, that was when I was in sales ops. But as far as they know and how you tell the story, that was PMM work.
Right. No, that makes sense. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I said that I'll say to people is that there's nothing that I've come across in my PMM work and my experience as a PMM that didn't require skills that I developed before coming into product marketing. What I found is that everything that I've done, like, has been transferable in terms of the things that really are required to be successful.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
And like I'll usually if I say that, I'll usually give a couple of examples of it, but yeah, it really does cross over.
Yeah, and honestly, when I read your resume, it makes a lot of sense as to how you were able to make that career transition, is because you've basically been developing the skill set just under different job titles. And now in this role, you're putting everything together. Yeah. All right, cool. So let's do a question that you've actually been asked. So this will be helpful for the audience who's interviewing for a PMM role. Dave, what is your experience with pricing?
Sure. My experience with pricing is very, very little. So it's not anything that I get involved in currently as a PMM. But what I do find is that the background that I come from is extremely analytics focused. So if I go back to when I was at HP, so when I was working as a customer facing operations manager, a lot of what I did there is make sure that I had all of the data of what was happening from a customer perspective. So we needed to make sure that contracts were being met. And then most of the customers that we worked with, it was very product based. So these were customers that were buying servers and PCs, notebooks from us. And we needed to ensure that if there was a specific delivery SLA, that SLA was being met. So with that role, I was responsible for running the data, for providing the information at quarterly business reviews to customers of here's how we're performing against our service level agreements. And I really was the person that ran, okay, here's what the numbers are. And then also for that role, I became the person that for our entire group, and we managed a number of different customers, myself and my peers, I would provide all of the rolled up forecasts. Here's what we said that we were going to do as a group in terms of customers and in terms of, let's say, exit rate from a quarter. Here's how we're tracking against it. Here's where we're expecting to go up a bit or down a bit. So everything I've done, like it really has been very analytics focused, and pricing is not something that I've been involved in, but I'm absolutely convinced I can pick it up easily just because I do feel I have a strong aptitude with numbers and determining, okay, how can you utilize data in order to make data-driven decisions? I look at pricing and I think it's in the same vein, and what I've done before will absolutely carry over to it.
Okay. And is this the answer you gave in the interview?
Likely close.
Okay.
I may have given a different example. I may have talked about other work that I've done with data, but the general themes of what I talked about would have been the same.
Okay. Okay. So this is a tough question, particularly because most PMM roles aren't so pricing focused, at least from what I've seen posted. And this one is pretty unique, and they mentioned it a couple of times, which makes me feel like this is probably something very important. Also, this role is
it's definitely a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and this role is reporting to the VP of marketing.
Right.
And typically pricing is done in larger companies, like it's typically its own VP, but typically sits either under the product side or the marketing side. So I'm not too sure how adept your interviewer slash hiring manager would be on the pricing side, which also may influence what makes a good versus bad answer. But so there's a couple of things. The first thing is Dave was very honest in the beginning, and he said he has not had experience with this, which honestly is probably pretty normal for most PMMs. And so I don't think it's going to be something that would detract from his overall candidacy just because pricing is not normally under their scope of responsibilities. So how Dave approached it is perfect, talking about some relevant experience. Yes, pricing is heavily data driven. And so Dave tried to create and give that confidence that because he is data centric, he knows how to use data, leverage data to make decisions, and he can learn things very, very quickly, that pricing would be a quick and easy ramp for him. And that's quite honestly almost the best that you can do given the hand that someone is dealt. And that's a good strategy for anybody who runs into an interview question asking about a specific skill that they don't necessarily have yet. And so that's always like a really good way to go about it. Now I do have a bit of a pricing background. I used to do pricing in my consulting work before I left to become a recruiter. So I have gotten some exposure to pricing. And so what I think would be helpful for you, Dave, especially given how pricing focused this role seems to be, is to look up how product pricing is typically done at larger companies, and like what are different pricing strategies, for example, right? What are different pricing structures, particularly in the SaaS space, because that's where pricing actually gets really complicated, as opposed to like selling on-prem or like basically not SaaS products. Pricing is very, very simple, but when it comes to SaaS products, because there's so many elements and then there's services that you tack on, not just the product itself, and then there's the renewal rates, and then there's discounts, and then there's deal desk, right? So there's a whole bunch of elements that get involved in this, and that's why it can be very complicated. But I think getting some fundamental knowledge for yourself would also help influence your answer a little bit more, right?
Okay.
So not just saying, hey, I'm great with data, like don't worry about it, I got it. But it's, hey, I'm great with data, and I've also done some research because I can tell that pricing is important. And I know that, from a very high level, there are 3 different pricing strategies, right, that many of our competitors use in the cloud space, right? And that may be just for initial deals, and then for renewals, typically, there's 2 or 3 different pricing strategies or structures that I have seen while working at my current company, right? Or, when it comes time for services, I've seen product pricing, look X, Y, and Z way, right? So coming in with a little bit of background knowledge and research would really, really knock this out of the park for you, right? As to the best of your abilities, which
Right.
is like, hey, I haven't done it personally, but I've been doing the research, or I'm getting exposure to it at Oracle, right? Or I know high level concepts. And so I can hit the ground kind of running as long as you give me a little bit of coaching along the way, right? As opposed to, yeah, I'm really good with data. Like
Sure.
take a chance, right? Like I'm really good at data, but I'm really good at data and I've done this research and I have a fundamental knowledge so I can, pick up things and onboard a little bit quicker.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
All right. Now there's a Facebook submitted question, which I want to get into. How do you handle projects where the change causes material drops in NPS/NSAT, NSAT, and adjacent stakeholders begin pushing back on your approach? Let me read it again, full stop. And I have no idea what these acronyms mean, Dave. So if you do, then that is perfect. How do you handle projects where the change causes material drops in NPS or NSAT and adjacent stakeholders begin pushing back on your approach?
Okay. I'm happy to tackle it.
All right, let's give it a shot.
I think the thing you have to do is you have to try to drill into why. You have to try to drill into the details of, okay, you know that you've put something out there and you have data that's coming back indicating that there's a drop in customer satisfaction, which is the opposite of what you're trying to do. What we're trying to do with everything is we're trying to increase customer satisfaction and get to the point of building value for customers. And so if you've got information that's indicating that there's a drop, you really need to dig. So digging, it's going to be a matter of first starting off and trying to understand and make sure that it's right. Make sure that you have the right numbers to look in and go, okay, what are the data points that are coming in? Is there anything that potentially is wrong with the calculations? Is there anything that maybe it's not a drop? Like it could very well be that it is, but you have to validate. You have to validate that the data that you're working with is correct. And then from there, let's say you determine, okay, it is correct. Then you have to try to drill in further and go, okay, what are the different things that could be driving it? Like, is it a particular new feature? Is it a way a feature has been introduced? Is it a matter of there needs to be more training? Like you just really need to try to drill in, okay, there is a problem and there is something that needs to be addressed, but just be very, very methodical and trying to understand, okay, what is it that's the problem? And then who specifically should tackle that problem? Like that's one of the big things is to try to understand, okay, who's the group that really can impact something and get them working on this effort to bring back customer satisfaction to the direction it should be going, and that's up and not down.
Okay. And playing devil's advocate here, because I think that's what this question is designed for the interviewer to do. So let's say you look through the data, you figure out why the net promoter score is going down and you start talking to the group to fix it or whatever. But let's say the group starts pushing back on you and says it's not their fault. It's actually because X, Y, and Z, and you're looking in the wrong place, or they don't want to listen to you and or take your suggestions. What do you do then?
You stay calm, for one. That's a key thing that happens. Like we've all been in situations with work where things start to get inflamed and people start to get upset and people can become very entrenched. And so you stay calm and you take the approach that would prevent that entrenchment, prevent this idea of people just getting very set of, no, it's not us. We're not doing anything. We're not changing anything. So you stay calm, you take a rational approach, and then you try to figure out, okay, will these people support what needs to be done? Are there specific small things that they can do? And if those things start to make an improvement, then you can ask for more. You really try to take this idea of taking a calm approach, taking a methodical approach, building on the relationships that you've built with these groups, and maybe you try to take it one step at a time. And then if you can see an improvement from those results, maybe then you ask for more, but you just take it piece by piece and little by little.
Cool. And I think the feedback from the person on Facebook says, I love this answer. Exactly what we did at our company. So seems like you are right on the money there. In terms of my feedback for the question itself. So obviously it's the right answer. It's the correct answer. It's the safe answer. And I think it's the answer every candidate would give, right? If you see your NPS going down, what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm gonna look at the data and figure out why it's going down and then solve the problem. So I would say your answer is like 80% of what I would recommend people to give. What I think the 20% is missing here, Dave, is what is your unique solution that only you have done or you can think of or that you would bring to them that no other candidate is going to be able to provide? Right? That's kind of like the secret sauce that I always talk about with certain people, right?
Right.
I would challenge you to think about ways where you can get that extra 20%, because right now your answer is safe and it is correct, but it's also the same answer that the other 5 candidates who are applying for this role are going to give, right? So where is it that you think you can add something that's unique about yourself or about your answer, about your approach that would help you stand out?
The other thing that I would add to this, and this gets to a matter of if you're dealing with, and so if you hit this spot where you're dealing with somebody who's saying, who's resistant to you asking to be something to be done, you also want to look at, is there another way? Is there another way to go about doing things? So I think of an example, and this is not necessarily working with a specific individual that was entrenched, but this was working with a situation that I was in that was entrenched, where when I came into product marketing, I was running win-loss, and win-loss is something that was done centrally across various Oracle pillars. And our leader, our executive vice president, left the company. And then with that functionally shut down all win-loss efforts across all of our pillars. So we were in essence left in a spot of, okay, is this program going to continue or not? Well, myself and one other person, we felt that there was value to it and that it was something that should continue. And so what I found is I found another way to run win-loss. And over a weekend, I built out win-loss using an entirely different survey methodology. And my peer and I, we then ran the program ourselves this entirely different way using a different approach where the goal was still the same of understanding what was causing deals to be won or to be lost, but the way that we went about it was completely different than what had been done across all of the pillars, because it was an entirely new way that we were the only pillar doing it because no one else took that approach. And so that's the thing, is if you hit a spot where there's something entrenched, and this example, it's about an entrenched program, if you will, rather than entrenched people, but it's still the same idea of looking for another way to go forward.
Nailed it. Love it, Dave. Love it. No, I think in a real interview, you'd shorten that up a little bit, just because they didn't ask you to give a full example, but it was perfect. Overall perfect. I would just add the result of you like still continuing to do the win-loss effort, and like why it's so beneficial for Oracle, even though it basically shut down, and how you had this huge impact by keeping it going, you and this other person. I would just throw that in there at the end because that'll really drive the point home. But that's perfect, right? That's like the extra 20% that will help you stand out from everybody else. Because everyone else is going to say the same thing, right? Like, well, if the NPS is going out, I'm going to look at the data, and then I'm going to figure out why, and then I'm going to go fix it. So if you stop there, then you're like, okay, well, Dave's answer was the same as Mike's, which was the same as Sally's, which was the same as Carl's. So who do I hire?
Got it. Okay.
Right. But it's like, oh yeah, but Dave said that. But Dave also mentioned about this time where he did blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, oh, wow, that's great.
Got it. Okay.
All right, cool. Let's do one of the other questions that you have been asked. So this is another real life PMM interview question. Have you brought a new product to market before?
That's kind of the same question. That's what we went through previously, though, isn't it? Because the answer that I would give is that I haven't brought a new product, but I have worked with an existing product that we reintroduced to the market.
Right. But the other question was focused on the successful elements of a product launch plan.
Okay.
So this one, I would basically tackle a different aspect of it. So basically you would say, no, I have not brought a new product to market. And I would say, oh, that's totally fine. I understand. Seems like you guys have done like product rebrands or launched new features, etc. Right. So when you were doing that, how did you work
Got
on
it.
developing a pricing strategy?
So I haven't brought a new, so to answer the original question, so I haven't brought a new product to market, but what I have done is brought an entirely new sales methodology to Oracle Salesforce. So with that, what we did is we launched a program called Engineered Selling, where we wanted to create this prescribed methodology within the CRM system. So we worked with developers to build out the methodology, to build out the different stages in the process. And then as we launched it, we worked with go-to-market teams who were launching sales plays, product marketing teams who had assets that they wanted to deliver to the reps, and then sales teams and sales leaders who wanted to make sure their reps were trained. And we would do these large training sessions where we would partner again with go-to-market and product marketing, and we would do sessions for reps anywhere from small groups of 10 or 20 up to, in the largest case, 1,200 reps, where we would go through, here's the training of how you go through the process, here are the steps that you need to follow. And so it was not a new product per se externally, but it was absolutely a new process that we launched for the sales team to utilize across the entire company.
Okay. I think the other example you gave was about, it wasn't a new product launch per se, but it was like a new feature or something, right?
A changed product. So
A
really
changed product.
a rebranding. So the same name of the product, the same
Okay.
overall product name, but
Yeah.
really an entirely different value proposition and feature set of it.
Okay. I like that one in terms of like the relevance to this question.
Yeah, and I guess but that's the thing that was throwing me off is I was like, okay, I mean, I don't want to talk about exactly the same thing that I talked about previously.
Yeah, and in a real interview, I like you probably wouldn't have gotten asked these same two questions because they kind of are asking the same things, but I just wanted to give the audience like an actual interview question that you were given, and then I was just going to attack it from like a different lens. So let's just say you do talk about this example where it was a product rebrand, essentially. Were you involved on the pricing side of that product rebrand?
Pricing, no.
No. Okay. Were you exposed at all to like the pricing for it, or did pricing change at all? Was there a new strategy?
No, there's definitely a new strategy in terms of the pricing changed, but the role that I've served is to make sure that the reps know what the new pricing is and that they know where to go in terms of getting information. One of the things that I find with our organization is that, and I feel a lot of large companies are going to be like this, people just don't know where to go to get information that is already out there. So that's one of the things I feel is very important is, yes, with the work I've done, like there is a lot of content creation, but there's also a lot of just traffic cop work. A lot of, oh, you're looking for this type of information, here's where you go to get it. Oh, you're looking for this type of information, here's where you go to get it. And I've always felt that that's an important role for somebody to serve. And this was the case before I was in product marketing, and it's the case when I'm in product marketing, is it's so valuable to fulfill that role of, oh, you want to know this? Here's where you go. Here's where you find it. Oh, you want to know this? Here's the person that you reach out to. And I've always prided myself in being someone that can serve that purpose.
Awesome. Okay. I think you said that there was a new pricing strategy with the product rebrand. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever dig into why the pricing changed?
The major reason that it changed is the value proposition became so very different from the perspective of this particular product. Previously was much more focused on just analytics. And as we changed it to be more about providing personalization capabilities, there's an entirely new value prop, an entirely new value prop, an entirely new thing that it was being provided. And so really, you really had to change everything in terms of how it would be priced, but then also just how it would be accessed, utilized, marketed, everything about it.
And then can you extrapolate that out now to like high level concepts about pricing that you could then use for interview answers?
I'm not sure. I think the big thing that occurs to me is like from the note that I made, this is obviously like not part of an answer to a question, but I think your statement was just so valuable of if you don't know something, if there's an area that you're not familiar with, there's ways to learn. Like there's information to learn where you can get to a point where, yeah, you're not making anything up. You can still say it's not something you've had direct involvement, but you can also say, here's like, I'm aware of this fact and here's what I've gone and learned about it. Like, I think that's the big thing. Like, I don't really feel like there's anything that I can reasonably extrapolate from that experience to say, here's what I know about pricing. But I feel like what I can do is I can go off on my own and learn things that I can come in and say, yes, I haven't had direct experience, but I do have a lot of experience and skill with numbers and analytics. And here's what I've learned about pricing. And I think it can be applicable to, your situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
think
I guess
that's what makes more sense for me. Like I just feel like I would be making up too much stuff if I was to try to extrapolate from my experience and to answer that question.
Yeah. Now, I guess one of the reasons why I brought that up is because you kind of were already doing it, right? You told me the pricing strategy had to change because the value proposition of the product essentially changed, right? Which is a high level
Right.
concept, but is still pricing strategy related, pricing structure related, which means you could still talk about it at a high level, right? And like if you needed to talk about why a certain pricing strategy needs to be adopted, then you would say, well, pricing for me in my experience is always tied to the value proposition that the product provides. Right?
Right.
Knowing what the true value proposition is or the true product features, et cetera, should drive our pricing strategy. Right. So therefore, like you can already speak confidently about something, about pricing, right? You know that pricing should be tied to value proposition of the product and it should be
True.
correlated or related. And then I'm sure the pricing model is based again off of the overall value proposition, depending on whatever you shifted from, right? But basically you've gotten exposure now to two different types of value propositions. One was the analytics base, which is what it used to be before, which had a certain pricing structure. And now it's the new rebranded product, which is less analytics focused, but also has a new pricing structure. And I'm sure if there's sales materials that you were directing sales reps to go read, I'm sure there was a little bit in there about why pricing has changed, right? Like why Oracle is doing this, which would probably give you another like a high level insight though as to like how pricing strategies are ultimately created, right? Because as a sales rep, I'm sure they would have they would tell them, right? Like pricing has changed because we want customers to focus on, X, Y, and Z, or we want you to drive more renewal sales as opposed to whatever, right? And even just from that,
Sure.
just in your auxiliary role, you could be like, okay, well, those are two other things I learned about pricing now, right? It's tied to pricing, it's tied to value proposition of the product. And also, if you want to sell X, Y, and Z, you would price it this way. Or if you want reps to focus on X, Y, and Z, you would do X, all these other things. So I actually think you're cutting yourself a little bit short. Like there are pseudo experiences you've had if you have the time to go back and like dig into it, where you could actually speak very knowledgeably about pricing, right?
Got it. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. We're almost at the top of the hour, but Albert has a question for you, which I think we should run through. And then I'm going to circle back to the questions from Carla and Carolyn at the beginning. But here's Albert's question.
Sure.
What is your proudest professional accomplishment so far and why?
I like helping people accomplish things. And the example that I think of goes back a ways in my career, but when I was at HP, I worked with a particular customer. They were a federal systems integrator, BAE Systems. And we had a contract with them around SLAs for product delivery. And so I worked with the customer. I had one particular guy that I worked with who was the contract administrator at BAE Systems. He was the person who put the contract in place, and I would present to him, okay, here's how we're doing against the contract. Here's what the SLAs are. Here's what our performance is. And then he came to me and he said, hey, I've got a problem. People aren't happy. They think it takes too long for us to get notebooks. And I said to him, I said, well, here's what the performance has been. Here's how we're doing against the SLAs. We're meeting the SLAs. And he said, well, people aren't happy with that. People think that it should be quicker, that they should get their notebooks more faster when they order them. And they're mad at me because I negotiated very standard service SLAs. And
Dave,
so
Dave, sorry to interrupt, but just for timing purposes and for learning purposes for you and the audience, in general, from an interview perspective, this example is too far back, right?
Okay.
The question was your greatest professional accomplishment.
Okay.
And so you probably should pick something a little bit more recent, just in general.
Okay.
And also relevance here is going to be super key for you. And so as soon as you told me back at
Okay.
HP, I already know that that's more than 7 years ago. And I also
Okay.
know that's before you were a PMM,
Sure. Okay.
right? So from an interview perspective, I think you should give me something more recent. And also that's kind of signaling that like you haven't done any major accomplishment since 2014, which is probably not the impression
Right.
you want to give, right?
Sure. I think the thing that I've done recently that I'm particularly proud of is we recently launched a customer data self-assessment. So that customer data self-assessment is designed for customers to quickly and easily go through 6 questions to determine what their competency is with customer data. And so I'm the person who built the assessment out. I worked with our agency in San Francisco. We actually built it based off of something that finance had done. But we looked at the assessment that finance had built, and I felt that it was good, but I felt that it could be better. So what I did is I worked with the agency to say, well, they took it this far, but they didn't take it a final step to having a score on the self-assessment and to having a report that generates from it. Is that something that we could do? We figured out that we could. And so I provided all of the content for the questions that would get asked, the blurbs that would come up when answers are given, the way the score would calculate, and then what the report looks like when it generated. And we took it all the way through, we built it out, and we made it available to customers, something that it can be accessed on the website of how do I determine my competency with customer data? And it was a very successful program, which we're then implementing across our other areas. So beyond our customer data platform, we're doing a path to service excellence, a path to sales excellence, a path to marketing excellence. And it's good. It's a good thing that we built.
I like this example more because it's more recent. What it would tie the whole thing together is if you can explain to me how that relates to being in product marketing. Like, did you build personas off of that? Like, what was the point of doing it type,
Demand generation. So we built it for demand generation. So the biggest thing that occurs is a customer will go through the assessment. They reach the point of they've taken the questions and they have an initial page, which is an overview of how they did. But then to view their score, they click on a button to view my score. And then from there, it goes through a gate where they put in or they verify their email. And then that email then flows through to our BDC team, and they get it as a lead that they can follow up on as here's someone really interested in customer data management.
And
So we
then
built it for demand gen.
and then the result of that in terms of revenue, leads generated, conversion would be
Too early to tell. So it's been launched for about a month now. And so too early to tell what the ultimate results are going to be. But it should be successful. And again, it's also something that we're confident enough in it as an approach that we're rolling it out to other areas beyond just data, the marketing, sales, and service.
okay. Cool. All right, Albert. Hopefully you enjoyed that piece. Now let me just circle back real quick. There was questions at the beginning, and I think these are probably more for Dave than for me. Carla is asking Dave, can you talk about how the questions have changed as you advanced in the interview process? She is interviewing for a marketing role, and they asked her for like a work sample, and she is unsure if she'll get the same interview questions at the beginning as she goes through the interview process.
I find it varies. So like Mission, for instance, Mission, the way that they structure their interviews, and like they're making it up as they go, but I think all of us really are, is there was an initial screen with a recruiter. What was interesting about the initial screen for Mission was it was very different than any recruiter screen that I've ever had, and that it actually was much more of an interview. I've found, and I've had a lot of recruiter screens over the last few months. By and large, I found most of the recruiter screens, like really what they're trying to, I feel like what they're really trying to do is just determine if you can speak somewhat coherently, and then they want to just put you in front of the hiring manager to see if they want to talk to you. For Mission, like it actually was kind of an interview with the recruiter. And then from there, it went on to the actual hiring manager, who asked a lot of like the type of questions that we talked about around pricing, around things like product launches, positioning. And then after that, this particular company, the next step is you go on for what they call a cultural fit interview, which asked questions like, how do you, like the question about teams, like how do you create an innovative environment of teams? There's also questions like, how do you create an inclusive culture, or what can you do to help foster an inclusive culture? So it was, again, this cultural fit type question. And then after that, there was another interview that was with product managers, which the questions really weren't that different than the original interview. But then the fourth one is to be an interview where, and it's unclear to me whether this will occur within the interview or whether it's a takeaway, but there's an assignment. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, in that case, there are different, like the cultural fit interview did have a lot more of those type of questions, but I've found that oftentimes, like in progressing, it doesn't seem like the questions change a lot because they're just different people asking them. And so it's kind of the same type of stuff as I feel like what I found.
Okay. All right. And Carolyn was asking on Dave's resume, there's dates next to Oracle that say to present twice. Is that intentional? I would say yes, and that's totally fine. Dave is basically just saying, hey, I've been at Oracle since 2015 until now, and I've been doing product marketing I've been a product marketing manager since 2019 until now.
Right.
So that's just kind of why it repeats. There's nothing bad about it at all from a resume perspective. So
I do have, I mean, if there's other things, like we can certainly address them. I did have one question that I'm curious to get your thoughts on, Corey, and frankly, anyone else for that matter. So what I'm curious of is I don't have it on my resume, but I also have and Albert knows this, I've created over the last couple of months, I've created a podcast, and that podcast is something that I hadn't done before the last few months, but I had an idea of what I wanted to do and figured out how to do it, figured out what the content would be, figured out, and then actually recorded all the episodes and have put them all live. I just don't like, again, I don't have it on my resume, but it's kind of the type of thing that I don't know. Like if somebody were to ask me a question that was open-ended enough of tell me something that you accomplished, like I may very well talk about it, but it's not work related. And so like I still don't know the answer in my head of how much
I
do I
would
really
chime
want
in
to
and
talk
say,
about
Dave,
something like that.
that Dave, I would chime in and say that that's actually an example of how you're a good content creator as a product marketing manager.
Yeah.
I mean, you did it, right? So you own it. And so, even your own website, which you've shared with me professionally on the book reviews that you do, is an example of you taking content and creating more additional content with it.
Right.
And pairing it with that podcast, so you're able to launch sort of an info product, if you will. And I think that counts as well.
Okay.
Right, anything that you can do, like if I go in a job interview and Albert's List is a valid example, you bet I'm using it. I'm bringing all my firepower to the game.
Right.
You
Yeah,
leave it
that's
all
what
on the
I
field,
feel.
and
What I
leave it
feel
all on the
too.
field.
Like I still don't know. I'm not opposed to like, I don't have it on my resume now, but I do kind of want to talk about it. I do want it to come up, like maybe not in a first interview, but if there's something that I'm really going to progress on, it's like, it's something that I've done. It's something I am proud of and something that frankly, not many other people have done. Now there's things that other people have done that I haven't, but this is something I've done that they haven't. So
Corey, what are your thoughts?
Mine is for if it's a real interview, I would say it's got to be relevant, right? So I mean, if it's a podcasting company, sure. If you're going to talk about how you developed a product marketing roadmap for your podcasting, right? And how successful it was running certain campaigns, you tried different pricing strategies. I don't know, right? But if for me, it would have to be relevant
yeah,
if you were going to use it, or maybe it's a podcast specifically about how to be a good product marketing manager, then yeah. But I think relevance should be super important, unless it's literally like, tell me about something interesting you do outside of your day job. Then if they're like
right.
spoon feeding you something, then for sure you're going to slam dunk it. But I would always go back to like relevance.
Okay, it's fair. Got it.
Yeah. And then there was one more question. I think it was for me, which was around job descriptions. The question is, Corey, what is your experience with the accuracy of job descriptions, comma, reflecting what the hiring manager really wants slash needs? Yeah, honestly, it's most of the time the job description is very high level. Most of the time, it doesn't tell you what they truly value or what problems they immediately need you to solve. That's kind of what you would find out on your initial phone calls with the recruiter and or hiring manager, for them to really explain to you what it is specifically that they're looking for. Because I guess from a legal perspective, you can only hire candidates that meet the minimum qualifications for a role. And so those are like hard stop requirements that a person needs to have. But there's probably a whole bunch of other experiences slash skill sets slash accomplishments that they would want the candidate to have that they may not put on the job description, just because from a legal perspective, it makes hiring people so much harder. So that's usually why job descriptions are very high level and vague on purpose. Yeah, cool. That's everything that I had to cover. And Albert, I will kick it back over to you.
All right, wonderful. Always a good time doing this. If any of you would like to come back and do a mock interview, you're always welcome to come and do this as well. I know I see Carla here. She did a mock interview in the past. Caroline, David, and anyone watching on Facebook, feel free to email me or reach out to me through the many different channels that you can. In the meantime, we have a bunch of different other events coming up. So if you're interested, click on through to those and we'll see you here in the future. Happy holidays, everyone. We'll see you later this week for another webinar, and best of luck in your job search. See you
Hey,
later.
Dave, real quick.
Yeah.
if you want some help with your interview prep, let me know. I know you're already in final rounds, but I feel like you're super, super close to like pushing it over the edge. And I'm sure Albert has some tips for you